The crystal glasses rattled against the mahogany table before anyone said another word. My husband stood over me, face burning red, finger pointed straight at the door. Apologize to my sister, or leave my house. 18 people sat frozen around that dinner table, family investors, friends all waiting for me to shrink like I always did. For 7 years I would have, but something inside me shifted that night, and what I said next didn't just ruin dinner. It exposed a secret none of them were ready for. For 7 years, my body had learned a very specific reflex. Not love, not partnership, survival. Whenever Justin's voice rose even slightly, my shoulders would curl inward without me thinking about it. My chin would dip toward my chest. My eyes would drop to the table, the floor, anywhere except his face. It wasn't something I consciously decided to do. My body simply knew the safest shape to become was smaller, less visible, less threatening. Nicole had her own way of triggering the same reaction. She didn't yell like Justin. She preferred precision. Little comments delivered with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Jessica just doesn't understand how business works. Some people are comfortable thinking small. Oh, don't mind her. She's just very cautious with money. The table would laugh politely. Justin would sigh in that weary way that made it sound like living with me was some kind of exhausting burden. And I would smile, a tight, careful smile. The kind that says, I'm not offended, even when every nerve in your body knows you should be. That was the system. I didn't fully understand it at first, but I adapted to it quickly. Nicole was the star, Justin was the protector, and I was the background. When Nicole had a new business idea, another boutique, another app, another venture that required just a little support, I was the practical one who asked questions, which meant I was the negative one, the unsupportive one. Justin would look at me the way people look at a slow cashier holding up a long line. Why do you always have to make everything about numbers? Jessica, because numbers mattered, because numbers were real. But in that house, reality was negotiable. Image wasn't. So, over time, I learned the cost of pushing back. Every objection led to a longer lecture. Every hesitation became proof that I was the problem. Eventually, my brain did the math. Silence was cheaper. If Nicole insulted me, I ignored it. If Justin criticized me, I apologized. If money disappeared from our accounts, I told myself it was temporary. That's the thing about survival strategies. They feel logical while you're inside them. You convince yourself you're keeping the peace. You tell yourself it's maturity, compromise, loyalty. But what you're really doing is shrinking your footprint, so no one notices how much space you deserve. 7 years of that changes the way you carry yourself. It becomes muscle memory. So when Justin slammed his hand against the table that night and pointed at the door, say sorry to my sister right now, or leave my house, my body almost followed the script. Almost. For a split second, I felt the old reaction starting, the tightening in my chest, the instinct to look down. The urge to say something soft and appeasing that would make the room relax again. But something interrupted it. Maybe it was the way the wine glasses trembled on the table from the force of his voice. Maybe it was the sudden awareness of the 18 people watching. Or maybe it was the simple fact that after 7 years of quiet accounting, I finally understood the numbers. Because in that moment, something cold and clear moved through my mind. Not anger, clarity. My shoulders stopped curling. Instead, they moved the other direction. My spine straightened slowly. Vertebra by vertebra, like someone adjusting the frame of a painting that had hung crooked for years. My chin lifted. I looked at Justin, directly, really looked at him, and for the first time, I noticed something I had missed before. He looked nervous, not furious, nervous. That realization was small, but it cracked something open. For years, I had seen myself through the lens they handed me. The difficult wife, the rigid one, the person who didn't understand how things worked. But suddenly, another version of myself stepped forward. Jessica the auditor, and auditors don't react emotionally when they see something wrong. They investigate, they observe, they calculate. Tears are a liability in my profession. They cloud judgment, they distort facts. So I shut that door in my mind the way you close a file cabinet. Because while Justin was shouting about respect, and Nicole was sitting there with that tight little victory smile, all I could see were numbers, transactions, transfers, 7 years of financial footprints that I had quietly documented. 7 years of discrepancies that no one else at that table knew existed. The strange thing about leverage is that most people don't realize they have it until the moment they stop being afraid. And right there under the chandeliers and the silent gaze of 18 witnesses, I understood something that changed everything. Justin thought he was giving me an ultimatum. Apologize or leave. But the moment I stopped shrinking, the equation flipped. Because suddenly I could see the entire balance sheet. And for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't the one with something to lose. I didn't answer Justin right away. The room was still vibrating from his ultimatum. Apologize to my sister or leave my house. 18 people sat frozen around that long mahogany table. Investors, family friends, his parents, people who had watched this dynamic play out for years and had quietly accepted it as normal. They were all waiting for the same thing, the apology, the small voice, the bowed head, the quick attempt to smooth things over so the evening could continue. Instead, I reached down and pushed my chair back. The scrape of wood against the floor cut through the silence like a blade. Nicole flinched. Slowly, I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. Not nervously, just automatically, the same way I straighten a stack of documents before opening a meeting. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood as I stepped away from my seat. No one spoke. Every pair of eyes followed me as I began walking down the length of the table. Justin was still standing where he'd been shouting, but now he looked confused, like the script had suddenly gone off track. "Jessica?" he said sharply, trying to regain control. "Sit down." I didn't. I kept walking. My heels tapped out a slow, steady rhythm across the floor, echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling of the vineyard estate, the only sound in the room. By the time I reached the far end of the table, Nicole had turned in her chair to face me. She leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other, that same tight smile returning to her lips. She thought she'd won. She thought I was coming to apologize, maybe kneel metaphorically, offer some kind of humble explanation so the family image could be restored in front of the guests. I stopped directly behind her chair. She smelled like expensive perfume and confidence she hadn't earned. Nicole tilted her head back to look at me. "Well," she said lightly, "we're waiting." I looked down at her. Then I spoke. "Nicole," I said quietly. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room was so silent it carried effortlessly across the table. "The record profits you're celebrating tonight," I paused just long enough for people to lean in, "are actually $285,000 stolen from your father's retirement fund and my personal savings." The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. No one moved. No one breathed. For a second, it felt like the air itself had been sucked out of the house. Nicole's smile froze in place. Just froze. Her husband Brandon slowly lowered the fork he'd been holding. It slipped from his fingers and clattered against the china plate with a sharp, metallic crack that made several people jump. Justin moved first. His chair scraped violently across the floor as he rushed toward me. "Are you out of your mind?" he hissed, grabbing my forearm so hard I felt his fingers digging into the muscle. "You're drunk. Stop talking. Come outside." His grip was tight, desperate. I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked back up at his face. For years that grip would have scared me. Tonight it didn't. I peeled his fingers off with calm, deliberate precision, the way you remove something unpleasant from your sleeve. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice stayed level, controlled. Justin the First continued turning slightly, so everyone at the table could hear me. Clearly, I'm a forensic accountant. A few people exchanged quick glances. "Do you really think I wouldn't notice a $250,000 hole in the books?" The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Nicole stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "She's lying." I didn't even look at her. Instead, I spoke to the room. The funds were wired through 3 shell vendors registered under Nicole's consulting accounts, I said calmly. The money originated from 2 sources. $60,000 from my savings. The rest transferred from Robert Sterling's retirement trust through unauthorized withdrawals. Justin's father stiffened at the end of the table. Nicole's face had gone pale. "You're insane," she said, but the confidence in her voice had evaporated. Behind me, someone whispered, $285,000. Justin stepped closer again, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Stop talking, now." But it was too late. The room had already started doing the math. Investors leaning toward each other, his father staring at Justin. Nicole shaking her head like she could physically reject the reality of the words. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I turned away from the table. Justin called my name. Nicole's voice rose into a sharp, panicked screech behind me. Someone knocked over a glass, but I was already walking toward the double doors. Each step felt strangely light, like gravity had suddenly reduced its grip. I pushed the heavy doors open and stepped out into the cool night air. Behind me, the dinner party exploded. Voices shouting, chairs scraping, glass breaking, accusations flying across the table that had just minutes ago been set for celebration. I didn't turn around. I walked across the gravel driveway to my car, the sound of chaos fading behind me, as I opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel. The vineyard lights glowed in the distance through the windshield. Then I started the engine. As the car rolled down the long drive, the estate shrank in the rearview mirror, and the silence inside the car felt heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. But it wasn't loneliness. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The motel room smelled like industrial lemon cleaner and stale cigarettes, not the faint, elegant citrus scent that drifted through the halls of the vineyard estate. This was harsher, artificial, the kind of smell that tried too hard to convince you something was clean. The bedspread was stiff, patterned with faded flowers that had probably been fashionable. Sometime in the late 90s, the carpet was worn flat near the door. A small lamp buzzed softly beside the desk. It was a sharp drop from the life I had just walked away from. No vaulted ceilings, no antique furniture, no walls lined with wine bottles worth more than my first car. Just a narrow desk, humming mini fridge, and a chair that wobbled slightly every time I shifted my weight. And yet sitting there opening my laptop, I felt cleaner than I had in years. The TV stayed dark. My phone sat face down beside the keyboard, vibrating occasionally as another message arrived. I didn't check it. Instead, I logged into the cloud server I'd maintained quietly for years. Not my firm's server, my own. A folder appeared on the screen. Inside, it were dozens of documents. Bank exports, screenshots, transaction logs. Years of quiet observations filed away, one small piece at a time. I opened the spreadsheet at the center of it all. The title was simple, J&N Liabilities.XLSX. The screen filled with rows of numbers, dates, transfers, notes. 7 years of my marriage translated into columns of red ink. For most of that time, I hadn't thought of it as evidence. I told myself that I was just being careful, organized, the same habits that made me good at my job. But deep down, some part of me had been documenting the truth long before I was ready to admit it. I scrolled slowly through the entries. October 12th, $15,000. Consulting fee Nicole. December 3rd, $9,400. Vendor marketing support, Nicole Ventures, LLC. January 4th, $8,200 credit card payment. Account holder Justin. Notes, Soho House membership renewal, Prada handbag. Flight to Tulum. I leaned back slightly in the chair, watching the story unfold line by line. Nicole had always been the visionary. At least that's how the family described her. She had big ideas, big ambitions, big plans to put the family name on the map. The first one had been a boutique clothing line, custom fabrics, luxury branding, pop-up events. It lasted 6 months. Then came the lifestyle coaching app. Nicole had spent nearly a year talking about it like it was the next tech revolution. There were designers, consultants, launch parties. The app never made it out of beta. After that came the high-end dog grooming spa, imported shampoos, crystal water bowls, Instagram influencers posing with poodles. It was shut down after a health code inspection. Each failure followed the same pattern. Nicole would burn through money chasing the next idea. When things collapsed, there was always an explanation ready. Bad timing, bad partners. The market wasn't ready yet. And somehow, every single time, the solution involved more funding, more support, more belief. I continued scrolling. Wire transfer after wire transfer, always labeled with some vague description. Consulting, marketing, vendor services. But the vendors themselves led nowhere. Shell registrations, empty websites, phone numbers that rang to voicemail boxes. Money in, money gone. And every time I had asked a question, Justin had the same response. I could hear his voice clearly in my head. "You're so rigid, Jessica." He'd lean against the kitchen counter, drink in hand, giving me that patient, disappointed look. "You treat everything like an audit," because it was. "Nicole is building something," he'd say. "You have to spend money to make money." I'd mention the account balances, the missing savings, the unexplained transfers. And that's when the word always came out. "Why are you being so stingy?" Stingy. The word had always landed like a quiet accusation. Not logical, not practical. Stingy. Like my concern about disappearing money was some kind of moral failing. Like protecting our savings meant I didn't believe in the family. And for a long time I believed him. I believed I was the problem. The cautious one. The person who didn't understand vision. But sitting there in that motel room staring at the spreadsheet, the shame I used to feel never arrived. Instead, something colder replaced it. Clarity, because the numbers didn't lie. The numbers told a very different story. I zoomed out on the spreadsheet so more rows filled the screen. Hundreds of transactions, thousands of small justifications, 7 years of quiet withdrawals. That's when the realization finally landed with full weight. I hadn't been supporting a dream. I had been financing a system where Nicole could fail endlessly without consequences. A system where Justin could move money wherever he wanted, as long as the story sounded convincing enough. And my role in that system had been simple. I was the safety net, the steady paycheck, the person whose financial discipline made the entire illusion possible. For years, I thought I was investing in my marriage, like putting money into a long-term fund. You contribute consistently. You endure some volatility. You trust that over time the return will appear. I thought the sacrifices were premiums, payments toward stability, toward love, toward belonging. But when I looked at the full ledger that night, the truth was undeniable. This wasn't an investment. It was a Ponzi scheme. Every dollar I contributed didn't build something real. It simply covered the last loss while funding the next illusion. The interest rate on their approval was brutal. No matter how much I gave, the debt of not being supportive enough never went down. If Nicole failed, I hadn't believed in her enough. If Justin moved money, I was too controlling for questioning it. The balance always reset, with me owing more. I stared at the glowing screen while the mini fridge hummed quietly beside the desk. For 7 years, I had treated their behavior like a series of attacks. Personal insults, emotional conflicts. But the spreadsheet told a cleaner story. It wasn't chaos, it was structure. A machine designed to absorb money, loyalty, and silence. And like every Ponzi scheme, it only worked as long as the investor kept believing the story. I moved the cursor slowly to the top of the file and hovered over the title again. J&N Liabilities. For the first time, the name felt accurate. I closed the spreadsheet. The motel room went quiet again, except for the soft hum of electricity in the walls. Somewhere outside, a car passed along the road. I sat there for a long moment in the dim light. Then a thought formed in my mind with the same calm certainty as balancing a ledger. I wasn't an investor anymore. I was liquidating the account. The next morning, my phone didn't ring. It convulsed. The cheap motel nightstand rattled as the screen lit up again and again, each vibration carrying the same frantic urgency. For years, that sound would have sent a spike of anxiety straight through my chest. This time I just watched it. Justin's name flashed first, then again and again. Text messages followed right behind the calls, arriving in a fast, angry stream. Pick up the phone. What the hell is wrong with you? You humiliated my father. Do you have any idea what you've done? I read them slowly, one after another, noticing something that would have terrified me just 24 hours earlier. Not once did he deny the money. Not once did he explain the $285,000. The entire focus of his anger was the setting, the timing, the embarrassment. In Justin's mind, the real crime wasn't the theft. It was that I had exposed it in public. That told me everything I needed to know. A few minutes later, Nicole joined the conversation. Her messages were shorter, sharper. You're pathetic. Everyone knows you're lying. You're jealous because my businesses are actually successful. I almost smiled at that one. Because while my phone kept vibrating, another notification appeared, this time from social media. Nicole had already begun rewriting the narrative for the audience that mattered most to her. She posted a black and white photo of herself looking thoughtfully into the distance. The caption read, "Some people try to dim your light because they can't handle your shine. Jealousy is a disease. Praying for them." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Even now, she wasn't addressing the numbers, just the image. Then the final call came through, my mother-in-law. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, the message appeared. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. Her voice was trembling. "Jessica, what happened last night was completely inappropriate. We don't air dirty laundry in front of guests like that. Your father-in-law is devastated. The investors are already asking questions. You need to come home and fix this before it gets worse." Fix this. That phrase echoed in my head after the message ended. Fix this. Not is the money missing. Not did Justin actually do this. Not even are you okay. Just fix it. In that moment, sitting on the edge of the motel bed with my phone buzzing in my hand, something clicked into place that I had never fully understood before. I hadn't just married Justin. I had married a system. Every family has roles, whether they admit it or not. In this one, the hierarchy was perfectly clear. At the top sat the image, the family brand, the shared belief that they were successful, sophisticated, untouchable. Everything revolved around protecting that illusion. In the center of the system was Nicole, the golden child, the future of the family name. It didn't matter how many businesses she launched or how many of them collapsed. It didn't matter how much money disappeared along the way. Nicole was always the victim of bad timing, bad partners, bad luck. Her failures were never allowed to belong to her. They were absorbed by the system, and that's where I came in. I wasn't the wife. I wasn't really even the partner. I was the buffer, the financial and emotional waste management department. When Nicole's projects burned money, my income quietly filled the gap. When Justin overspent, my savings balanced the accounts. When tension built inside the family, my silence smoothed everything over. I was a scapegoat who made the rest of the structure stable. And for 7 years, I had performed that role perfectly. Until the night before. Because the moment I spoke the truth at that dinner table, I had done something unforgivable in their system. I stopped absorbing the damage. That's why the messages kept coming. Justin demanding I apologize. Nicole demanding I retract the accusation. My mother-in-law demanding I repair the situation. They didn't need me to admit I was wrong. They needed me to restore the machine. Because without someone willing to carry the blame, the whole structure started to collapse. I looked down at the phone one more time as another message arrived. "Justin again. You need to come home right now." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my settings. Block, mute, archive. Each tap felt strangely quiet. I wasn't fixing the machine anymore. I was dismantling it. 72 hours after I walked out of that dinner party, I wasn't sitting on a therapist's couch crying about a broken marriage. I was sitting in a glass conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown office tower. Across the table from me sat a woman named Elena. Elena was technically a divorce attorney, but the word attorney didn't quite capture her presence. She had the calm, watchful stillness of someone who had spent years dismantling people's lives for a living. Perfect posture, perfect suit, perfectly neutral expression. The only movement in the room was her manicured finger tapping lightly against a stack of documents I had placed in front of her. My documents. 7 years of quiet accounting condensed into a series of summaries. Bank transfers, account balances, corporate filings, Nicole's shell vendors, Justin's business accounts, the paper trail I had spent years noticing, saving, and organizing. Elena flipped through the pages slowly, her eyes moving, with the speed of someone used to absorbing financial information quickly. The silence stretched for several minutes. Finally, she leaned back slightly in her chair. This, she said, "Tapping the top sheet is aggressive." I didn't respond. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. "You're asking to freeze the joint accounts immediately," she continued. "You want a court order for a full forensic audit of his company. And you're requesting subpoenas for the sisters' consulting accounts." She paused, studying me carefully. That doesn't leave them much room to breathe. I held her gaze. They don't breathe, I said quietly. They suffocate. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Elena's mouth. Not warm, not sympathetic, just appreciative. Like a professional recognizing another professional. Most people who sit in that chair across from a divorce attorney are still tangled up in emotion. They're angry, hurt, looking for validation. I wasn't. By that point, I had already done the emotional math. The marriage was over. What remained was the accounting. Elena flipped another page in the summary packet, scanning the list of transfers again. "You compiled all of this yourself?" she asked. "Yes." "How long have you been tracking it?" "Years." That answer made her look up again. "Years," she repeated. I nodded. "I'm a forensic accountant." The explanation hung in the air for a moment. Then Elena nodded slowly, as if a puzzle piece had clicked into place. "That explains the structure," she said, turning one of the pages around to look more closely at a transaction timeline I had built. "Most people bring me emotional stories. You brought evidence." "Stories are expensive," I said. "Evidence is cheaper." That time, the smile reached her eyes. She closed the folder and folded her hands on the table. "All right," she said. "Let's talk strategy." The word strategy felt strange in the context of a marriage ending, but at the same time, it felt exactly right. Because that's what this had become, a controlled dismantling. "First step," Elena said, sliding a legal pad toward her. "We file an emergency motion to freeze the marital assets. Joint accounts, shared investments, anything he might try to move." She began writing quickly. "If he's been transferring money to cover his sister's businesses, he'll try to hide whatever is left the moment he realizes you're serious." I nodded. "I assumed that." "Second," she continued, "we request a forensic audit of his wealth management firm." Her pen paused briefly before she added another note. "If the transactions you documented are real, his licensing board is going to be very interested." "Good," I said. Elena glanced up again. No hesitation, no doubt. Just confirmation. "And third," she said, tapping the pad, "we subpoena Nicole's business accounts. If she's been receiving funds through shell vendors, the paper trail will expose it." The plan unfolded across the table in clean, logical steps. Freeze the money, force the records into the open, follow the transfers wherever they led. For the first time in years, I felt like I was back in familiar territory. Not the emotional chaos of family dinners and passive-aggressive insults, but numbers, systems, cause and effect. Elena set her pen down and leaned forward slightly. "One more question," she said. "If we push this hard, the situation escalates quickly. Financial crimes, licensing violations, potential civil liability." She watched my face carefully. "You're sure you want to go this far?" I thought about Justin standing over me at that table. Apologize or leave my house. Then I thought about the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop in that motel room. 7 years of disappearing money. 7 years of silence. "I'm not escalating," I said calmly. "I'm auditing." The room went quiet again. Then Eleanor reached for the stack of legal forms beside her. "Good," she said, "because if we move fast, we can take away his ability to control the money before he even understands what's happening." That afternoon, we filed the paperwork, an emergency court order. Marital assets frozen, just like that. The financial oxygen Justin had been breathing for years stopped. That night, long after the city outside my window had gone quiet, I opened my laptop again. Freezing the joint accounts was a strong first move. It stopped the bleeding. It forced Justin to sit still while the legal process caught up with him. But something about the numbers still bothered me. The $285,000 we had traced during the dinner confrontation didn't fully make sense. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the spreadsheet I had already built. The columns glowed softly in the dark room, rows of transfers stretching back across years. 60,000 of it had come from my savings. I knew that part with certainty, but the rest had always felt slightly off. The totals didn't match what I knew about our accounts. Even if Justin had drained everything we shared, there still wouldn't have been enough to cover the full amount wired into Nicole's shell vendors, which meant the money had come from somewhere else. I pulled up another database. Justin's firm, the boutique wealth management company he ran for a small group of private clients, mostly longtime family friends and a handful of older investors who trusted the sterling name. And one of those clients was his father. The transaction logs loaded slowly onto the screen. Hundreds of entries, routine movements, portfolio adjustments, capital allocations. At first glance, everything looked ordinary. That's the thing about financial fraud. It rarely announces itself loudly. It hides inside the language of legitimate transactions. But patterns always exist. You just have to look long enough. I began scanning the entries. Month by month, my eyes trained to pick out anything slightly unusual. Then I saw it. Capital reallocation. The description was bland, professional, completely normal for an investment account. But the date caught my attention. 3 days before one of the largest transfers into Nicole's vendor accounts. I clicked the entry open. Transfer from Robert J. Sterling. Revocable. Trust. Amount $45,000. Authorization document attached. My chest tightened slightly. Robert Sterling Justin's father was meticulous about his retirement funds, conservative investments, stable portfolios. He checked his statements obsessively. A sudden $45,000 reallocation wasn't impossible, but it was unusual. I opened the authorization file. The PDF appeared on the screen, a standard withdrawal form. Clean formatting, firm letterhead, nothing visually suspicious. At the bottom sat the signature, Robert Sterling. For a moment, I simply stared at it. Then my mind pulled up a memory. Robert signing birthday cards. Robert signing the vineyard property deed. Robert signing checks at the kitchen counter. He had a tremor in his right hand. Not severe, but noticeable. His capital R always wobbled slightly at the top loop, and when he wrote quickly, the letters in sterling tended to separate instead of flowing together. The signature on the form didn't wobble. It was smooth, confident. The pen pressure was heavy on the downstrokes, consistent across the entire name. I zoomed in. 400% magnification. The pixels sharpened around the ink lines. Still smooth, still controlled. That wasn't Robert's hand. A quiet chill moved through me. I opened another document in a second window. Our marriage license. Justin had signed it 7 years earlier. I dragged the windows side by side and zoomed in on his signature. At first glance, the names looked completely different. Robert, Justin. But handwriting isn't just about letters. It's about habits. The way the pen moves across the page. I leaned closer to the screen. There, Justin had a distinctive flourish when he finished writing. A tiny upward flick at the end of his letters, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. An arrogant little signature tick. I highlighted the N at the end of Justin. Then I looked back at the withdrawal form. The T in Robert, the same flick, same angle, same pressure. I zoomed further. The slant of the letters matched. The spacing matched. Even the way the ink pressed slightly darker on downward strokes was identical. My breath caught. Justin hadn't just moved money between accounts. He hadn't just quietly redirected funds to cover Nicole's endless ventures. He had forged his father's signature. He had authorized withdrawals from Robert Sterling's retirement trust without permission. I leaned back slowly in my chair, the glow of the screen washing the room in pale blue light. 45,000 there, another 45 a few months later. A third withdrawal disguised the same way. The missing money suddenly made sense. The spreadsheet totals aligned perfectly. My pulse slowed as the realization settled fully into place. This wasn't a marital dispute anymore. This wasn't about shared savings or unfair spending. Wire transfers across accounts, forgery of financial authorization, unauthorized withdrawals from a retirement trust, fraud, identity theft, possibly elder financial abuse. I reached for my phone and checked the time. 2:03 a.m. Then I dialed Elena. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep but instantly alert. "I hope you're calling with good news," she said. I looked back at the two signatures still glowing side by side on my screen. "No," I said quietly. "I'm calling because I found something bigger." A pause. "What kind of bigger?" I took a slow breath, the kind that doesn't end in divorce court. Because at that moment, I understood something with absolute certainty. Justin wasn't just facing a settlement anymore. He was looking at a federal case. The mediation room looked like it had been designed to intimidate people. Glass walls, polished mahogany table, chairs that were just a little too stiff to be comfortable. The air smelled faintly of expensive air conditioning and floor polish. Justin sat across from me. Nicole sat beside him. And next to them was their lawyer, a tall man in a perfectly pressed three-piece suit who kept checking his watch. Like his time was far too valuable for this conversation. Helena sat to my left, relaxed, scrolling through something on her tablet with the bored patience of someone who already knew how the story would end. Justin refused to look at me. He stared at the table instead. Finally, their lawyer cleared his throat and slid a thin stack of papers across the polished surface toward me. "We're prepared to offer a settlement," he said smoothly. "I didn't touch the papers yet. Justin is willing to allow you to keep the Camry." The lawyer continued. "And we're offering a one-time payment of $15,000 to help you transition." He paused slightly, like he expected gratitude. "In exchange, you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the family's financial matters and vacate the marital property within 7 days." For a moment, the room was quiet. Then Nicole laughed. It was short, sharp, almost delighted. She leaned forward, crossing her arms on the table. "Honestly, Jessica," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, "you should take it." She gestured lightly toward the settlement papers. "After the stunt you pulled at dinner, the embarrassment you caused, you're lucky we're offering you anything." Her blazer was new, designer. I recognized the brand instantly. Probably paid for with money that didn't belong to her. "You can go back to your little apartment," she continued with a thin smile. "And your little life. Pretend none of this ever happened." I finally picked up the papers. $15,000. An NDA. 7 days to leave. I looked up slowly. 15,000, I repeated. Justin finally lifted his eyes. "It's generous," he said coldly. "Take it, Jessica, or we go to court and I bury you in legal fees." He leaned back in his chair. "You know I can do it." For a moment, the room was perfectly still. Then I turned slightly toward Elena. She gave the smallest nod. That was all the confirmation I needed. I reached into my bag and pulled out a blue file folder. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. I slid it across the table toward Justin. "I don't think we'll be going to court," I said calmly. Justin frowned. "What is this?" "Open it," I said. "Page 3. He flipped the folder open with obvious irritation, skimming past the first page. Transfer summaries. Page 2. Bank logs. Then he turned to page 3. The high-resolution signature comparison. For a second, nothing happened. Then the color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had flipped a switch. His fingers tightened around the paper. "What?" he whispered hoarsely. Nicole leaned over. "What is it?" Justin didn't answer. Their lawyer reached across, took the folder from him, and scanned the page. His expression changed instantly. Gone was the relaxed confidence. His jaw tightened. He closed the folder slowly. "We need a recess," he said quickly. "No," I said. My voice cut cleanly across the room. "We don't." Every eye turned toward me. I leaned forward slightly. "That document is a withdrawal authorization for $45,000 from Robert Sterling's revocable trust," I said evenly. Nicole blinked. "So, the signature," I continued, "is a forgery." Silence. I have a handwriting expert, prepared to testify that the pen pressure slant and terminal flourish matched Justin's handwriting, not his father's. Nicole's mouth fell open. "You wouldn't." I met her eyes. "I would," I said simply. Then I slid another document across the table. My counteroffer. Justin stared at me, pale and rigid. "You will liquidate Nicole's assets immediately," I said. "Her vehicle inventory, consulting accounts. The funds will be used to repay the stolen money in Robert's trust." I tapped the second page. "You will sign the deed of the house over to me, free and clear as restitution for the marital funds you transferred." Justin swallowed hard. "That's everything," he whispered. I shook my head calmly. "No," I said. "That's the balance." Then I looked directly at their lawyer. "And if we leave this room without a signature?" I let the sentence hang for a moment. I walked 2 blocks down the street to the district attorney's office and handed them that folder. The room went silent. Justin looked at Nicole. For the first time, she didn't look confident. She looked terrified. Then Justin slowly reached for the pen. 6 months later, my kitchen was half the size of the one I used to clean in that vineyard house. The countertops weren't marble. They were laminate. The view outside my window wasn't rolling rows of grapes. It was a metal fire escape and the brick wall of the building next door. And yet every morning when sunlight slipped through the blinds and spread across the floor, the apartment felt lighter than any room I had lived in before. It was quiet. Not the heavy silence of a dinner table where you're afraid to breathe wrong. This was a different kind of quiet. Easy, uncomplicated peace. My coffee maker hummed softly while I opened my banking app, something that used to trigger a small wave of dread every single morning. Now the screen showed exactly what I expected. Checking, savings, retirement, all green, all mine. The settlement had closed the accounts between us cleanly. Justin signed, the trust was repaid, the house equity transferred. Nicole's business assets were liquidated to cover what they had taken. Justin lost his financial license soon after, quietly but permanently. No firm would touch him after the investigation started asking questions. Nicole's ventures collapsed almost immediately, without money to feed them. And the family, without someone to blame, they turned on each other. But the strangest part of it all was this. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry either. For years I thought freedom would feel like revenge. Instead, it felt like indifference. Like closing an old account and realizing you no longer owe anything. Because in the end, the most valuable asset I recovered wasn't the money. It was my dignity. Sometimes the most powerful victory isn't revenge, it's distance. Walking away from a toxic system is like closing a set of old accounts. You stop investing energy where the returns were always loss. The sunk costs stay in the past, but your dignity comes back with you. When Jessica let go, she didn't win against them. She won herself back. If this story resonated with you, consider liking, sharing, or subscribing. Someone else might need this reminder too.